Arc 6, Chapter 49. To you, the worthless excuse. Gradually, he became aware of a sensation of numbness coming out from his arm. Slowly but steadily, the scratch marks of Meili's dying throes were starting to vanish and heal. Realizing that he was being healed, Subaru turned his eyes away from his sleeve. Subaru. Well, this room was certainly the big deal it was made out to be. They had stated that the spirit who resided here in this ivy-filled room would heal the wounds of living beings. That said, as Subaru had yet to have the experience of visiting the room with any trauma up until now, he had doubted how effective it would be. While relishing the sensation of his wounds actually being healed, he was being made to reconsider that he had been unnecessarily suspicious. Meili, despite it being my dying message, Oni-san is still being awful. Subaru. Meili. But Beatrice Jan's judgment was terribly helpful, right? Thanks to her, the evidence left around your wrists will disappear. The shade of the little girl incessantly speaking inside his head annoyed him. What really anguished him was that the girl's words really struck deep into his heart, to the point it was impossible to say that they did not reflect Subaru's inner thoughts. He did not know whether this little girl's shade one was running rampant due to being part of Subaru, or whether it had been because of her ghost literally possessing him after reading her Book of the Dead. Whatever the reason may be, he mustn't bend his ear to what the little girl was saying. He mustn't listen to her. Just that fact brought his sense of annoyance. Thus, Subaru consciously closed his mind to the sound of these incessant hallucinations. However, the more Subaru attempted to seclude himself in his own shell, the louder and more talkative her shade became, growing more impish in poking fun at Subaru. The most annoying thing was Meili. Right now, you don't have Beatrice beside you anymore, do you? Since there's no one in your way, why don't you just get rid of that sleeping girl, Subaru? Hick. Meili. Hee. Don't start looking like you're about to cry. I know you're trying to ignore me, but you can't. Oni-san's such an adorable guy. The little girl's voice, which had no corporeal presence, was heard by Subaru as if it was a whisper in his ear. If he closed his eyes, it felt like the little girl was gently leaning on his back, her figure spitting out these sweet words to his ears accompanied by sweet sighs. It almost felt like he was able to gaze upon her hallucination. He had been brought to the spirit's room for rest, and once again Subaru was presented with the same choice as when holding the Book of the Dead. Beatrice was on her way to tell Emilia and the others that Subaru had left the library of Taigeta and that she had brought him to this room. Right now, Subaru had procured some time when no one would be able to see what was going on. And right in front of him was that girl sleeping on the ivy bed, just as if she were an offering to him, all alone Subaru. Rem. Even if he attempted to say the name of the comatose girl out loud, no emotions arose within Subaru. He had no known memories of her. He only knew her name. All he was aware of was that she was Ram's twin sister and that she was one of Emilia's companions, and that they had come to this tower looking for a way to wake her up from her long slumber. Beyond that, he wanted to know more. Meili, the means are there. It's either you do it or you don't do it. The sweet girl's temptation reminded Subaru, whether he was willing or not, about the plan with the Books of the Dead. Even though now she had fallen into a deep sleep, there must certainly have been a relation of some sort with Subaru at the time she had been in good health. By borrowing the powers of her Book of the Dead, he could find out what kind of relationship and feelings she possessed towards Subaru. Above all, he would be able to take that life far more easily than Meili's. The likes of this girl, in a comatose state as she was, could even be suffocated by just smothering her face with a damp cloth. He must do it quickly. Quickly. Subaru, am I an idiot? No, I am definitely an idiot. Restraining the feeling of impatience brimming in his arm, Subaru rethought his foolish idea. Immediately carrying something out like that would not be good. Jumping at the situation in front of his eyes, as if drooling, would have no meaning if there was no continuation. Killing was the method. Subaru desired to find out what everyone truly believed of him. As far as it came to achieving that result, this was also a good moment to screw up how he would do it and rush the killings. Even at the library of Taigeta, hadn't he thought the same way? If he was to carry out his Book of the Dead plan, he needed to choose the right order to eliminate the people carefully. Subaru, Julius, Emilia, Shala, Ram, Echidna, Beatrice, Rem. Counting them on his fingers, Subaru listed the people who remained inside the tower, excluding Meili, namely, the order in which he would prefer to get their Book of the Dead if possible. This order should enumerate who would most likely become a hindrance to his execution of the Book of the Dead plan. Conversely, unless he followed this hit list he had come up with, if he were rush into it and act, then it would not work out. He did not want to screw it up. Meili, if you don't, then you'll end up missing out on killing them. How scary. Subaru. He kept his silence towards the talkative shade. She seemed to give off quite a strong hint of displeasure towards him. Nevertheless, even if he tried to direct words at her, her behavior would not alter. It would remain the same. Subaru did not necessarily want to kill Emilia and the others. But still, if he had to kill them, he wanted to go through with that only once. Only once was fine, and only if a complete plan was in his possession. Subaru. And thus, with that in mind, Subaru sighed as piercing yellow eyes gazed at him. Noticing them, the gaze came from the figure sitting right next to the sleeping girl in this spirit's room. The gaze had come from his jet-black ground dragon, Patrash. Patrash's gaze seemed to be filled with worry and gloom as she regarded the exhausted Subaru. It might be that, before leaving this place for a while, Beatrice had told her, keep an eye on Subaru, in fact. As long as Patrash's eyes were focused on him, no matter how frustrated he got, he would be unable to commit any violence towards the sleeping girl. In that respect, he would like to thank Patrash for having made him not make a premature decision in this matter. But after reading that Book of the Dead, Subaru was becoming unable to direct solid trust towards anyone, even to Patrash, who he had felt a great deal of affection to. Subaru. I wonder, is this all going to your plan? Natsuki Subaru. He wanted to believe in them. The more he pondered about their true intentions, the more Natsuki Subaru would isolate himself within this different world where he had no one to turn to. Isn't this clearly because of the game presented by the wicked Natsuki Subaru? Subaru. Bit by bit, the scratches caused by Meili continued healing. Whilst savoring the feeling of his aches and pains fading away, Subaru rolled up his sleeve to the place the painful scars displaying Natsuki Subaru was here, were carved. He traced his nails above the scabs and realizes they were also being healed. He did not mind that the scratches which served as proof of his horrible criminal acts were fading. No, not his. He had not been himself then. However, the message that indicated the self that was not his self, only that could he not erase. Subaru, this message as well. The wound that had been carved into his left arm, and the one in his right arm too, had both been scratched in a similar manner. On his still unfamiliar black arm mottled by sable spots, there was a wound that had not been there at first. He had carved this wound there, as if returning the favor for the wound carved into his left arm by his other self. Who are you? He held that serious question engraved into him as a wound. Subaru. And so, while injuring himself without giving a toss about his own body, Subaru, at the same time, was unable to recognize something. Stranger, The fact that Patrash was gazing pitifully at the wound left behind on Subaru's arm as a result of his own self-harm. Even if the wounds Meili had bestowed him with were to disappear, if they were to look at Meili's own hands, they would find it evident that she had died putting up a fight, trying to desperately ward off the one who had slain her. The logic of thinking that he had concealed Meili's murder from everyone was based entirely on his terribly sloppy cleanup afterwards. All it would take is for one gear to collapse to set everything into motion. Feeling like a marionette being dangled from the top of this tower, standing on thin ice, turning his face away from the root of his problems, an amusing clown desperately fighting to keep his balance. That was what Subaru had become. However, this amusing clown's performance would finally earn itself a curtain call without encountering any more obstacles in his way. And that was because, luckily for him, Meili Portrout's corpse had not been found anywhere. Subaru, the atmosphere around the dinner table was awfully heavy between everyone as they looked at each other. This was due to the dangerous circumstances that they had found themselves in. Half of them recognized that their desperate search for Meili's body had been fruitless and that they had already been far too late. Although they were too few to call their search an all-out frontal assault, they had still split into groups and mobilized everyone so that they could search for her. As a result, they had spent almost half a day trying to find her without even finding a trace of her. The feeling that all of it had been for naught had grown. It was understandable that many of them were experiencing immense levels of stress. Ram, everything has just been going wrong since we came to this tower, huh? Subaru. No need to put what was left unsaid so clearly, even if we're thinking that. Whilst munching on his dinner, which consisted of something like dry bread, he mumbled this, staring at Ram with a growing feeling of lethargy. Receiving Subaru's protests, Ram shrugged her shoulders, a blank look adorning her face. However, even for her usual calm and composed self, an aura of fatigue was coming off her. And it was not just Ram, everyone in the tower was in the same state as her. Emilia. For now, I first went to ask Reed about her, but he said he hadn't seen her. He said that no one had come there since yesterday, and that he was getting bored. I don't think he was lying. Since Maylie had seen what Reed's like, I don't think she'd have gone there alone. Beatrice. It's hard to imagine that even that arrogant man would harm such a little girl. Though, I can't say that for sure, as scary as that is, I suppose. But Betty ultimately agrees with Emilia's thoughts, in fact. Emilia and Beatrice exchanged words between them regarding the red-haired, eye-patch-clad man who guarded the second floor. Although in his mind that man had done nothing but cause him great torment, Emilia had faced him and more or less heard him out safely. It seemed like she had managed to come back unharmed. Feeling a sense of relief by that fact, Subaru shook his head. There was no reason for him to feel such a sense of relief. Rather, he has no right to considering what had transpired before. He did not know if he even had the right to comfort Emilia. Anastasia, can I mention one thing? It may sound cruel, but I want to propose something, and I am prepared that I may end up being shouted at because of it. Draining her bowl of bland soup, Echidna raised her hand as she finished her meager dinner. Facing everyone around the dinner table, she narrowed her turquoise eyes and spoke. Anastasia. Searching for that little girl, Maylie, I think we should stop for today, and from tomorrow, we should focus on trying to capture this tower again. What are your thoughts about that? Emilia. Hick, we will do no such thing. What would Maylie think of us? Anastasia. It is already too late. She has no way to think or feel anything. That was proved by Natsuki-kun's confirmation after reading her Book of the Dead. I am against further searching for her. Emilia had been the first to oppose Echidna's proposal, which could be said to have been both realistic and level-headed. However, Echidna's expression did not waver when hearing Emilia's argument, purely born from her emotions. However, on behalf of Emilia, who was at a complete loss for words, Beatrice spoke in her place with a weight, I suppose. Beatrice, your point at first seems to make sense, in fact, but it seems quite sudden for you to mention it, I suppose. Why is it that you want to stop the search for Maylie, in fact? Anastasia, was it really that strange to say? The food supplies we brought into this tower are limited, and as more days pass by, it is likely that staying here will become more burdensome for everyone in each camp. If our stay greatly drags on, then you ought to think that a search party will be sent out to look for us. Ram, naturally. Emilia-sama and Anastasia-sama. Well, her contents right now are different, but both of you are esteemed candidates for the royal selection. You both should not even be in this tower amid the sand sea. Beatrice and Ram began to display a somewhat lukewarm attitude, beginning with Echidna's proposal. The suggestion, that went by the rules of rationality, served as a trigger for colder opinions, making the tense atmosphere around their dinner meeting more intense. Shala, gee, this isn't much fun. If you're going to squabble, I'd rather you did it away from Master and I, but I don't mind either way. As for me, I'll build a happy family with Master, just the two of us. A girl first, and then a boy, and then another boy too. He did not deign to reply to Shala, who had slipped into the seat right next to him as she babbled on, sticking her tongue out at the tense atmosphere around her. She had also shown this kind of attitude back at the library. Shala had pressed Subaru for a choice back at the library. What was it that she had wanted Subaru to reply to her? As she referred to Subaru as her master and completely idolized him, then how far would she go for him? How far would she obey him if Subaru were to give her a command? Julius, We should stop arguing. Julius, with anguish etched across his handsome face, broke the tense mood around them. He placed his arm in front of Echidna and looked at Beatrice and Ram. Julius, Beatrice Sama, Miss Ram. As a member of her camp, I deeply apologize for Echidna's careless words. However, do not misunderstand what she meant to say. She did not make such a proposal with only rationalism in mind, with no other meaning to it. Anastasia, Julius, stop. That speech was. Julius, Emilia Sama's camp may have lost the little girl that accompanied us here. That pain can be felt there. If possible, we should be more understanding in this situation. Hearing Julius's sincere remarks, Echidna halted herself from speaking any further. Julius then turned to face Beatrice once again. Julius, for now, Anastasia Sama's body has been pretty much taken over by Echidna's spirit. It is true that we cannot find a way to get Anastasia Sama back from her current state, but there are other issues as well. Echidna is, with every passing moment, consuming Anastasia Sama's odd. Emilia. Her odd, so she's always been burning her way through it. Has it always been like that, ever since Anastasia-san became unable to be woken up? Julius. Indeed. I imagine that is why she wants to hurry in borrowing the sage's wisdom by capturing this tower. The rest of them reacted in shock at hearing Echidna's secret being spoken out loud by Julius. Having had her secret revealed by her own camp member, Echidna shrugged her shoulders at the people staring at her. Anastasia, no point in trying to gloss over this. It is as Julius said. I do not think it a good idea to consume so much of Anna's odd like this, which really is notabundant in the first place. If I can, I want to return this body back to Anna as soon as possible. Emilia, even going as far as letting go of her human body, so you're free. Anastasia, even if I can free Anna's body, my own mind itself is being bound not of my own accord. I don't know how much you will trust me with what I am saying, but Echidna paused for a moment and then resumed her speech. Anastasia, essentially, one's very vessel should contain its own being. Even if you just borrow the outer shell, if the insides do not come alongside, it will fall to tatters and become unnatural, and that is just plain awful. Everyone. Casting her eyes down, Echidna's words had been relentless, as if cursing herself. Her story had struck Subaru's heart to its very core as he listened in casually. If one just borrowed the outer shell, and the insides did not come with it, that pierced plus his heart truly profoundly. Anastasia, anyways, that is why I want to hurry up and capture this tower. By all means, if you do not believe what I have said, you can let someone like Beatrice poke around this body just to make sure. I suppose she will immediately notice how distorted I am as a spirit, and how much odd I have consumed. Echidna entrusted onto others the proof of her own situation without noticing the turmoil brimming inside of Subaru, brought upon him by her words. In fact, after being nominated, Beatrice took Echidna's arm and probed into what in principle was her body. It seemed like Echidna's words were proven to be true. And, receiving that result, Emilia, okay, I understand the difficult circumstances that Echidna and Anastasia-san are in. It's no wonder you want to hurry up and climb all the way up to the top of the tower. Anastasia, I do not know if this will bring you peace of mind, but if it is as is said, and the sage in this tower is omniscient, possessing esoteric wisdoms, then it is possible that they may also know the whereabouts of where the little girl disappeared. When putting it this way, I really do know how unfair it is, but, Emilia, no, thank you. It's better than having no hope left at all. You're also looking out for me, and Meili too, aren't you? Anastasia, maybe. Or maybe it is just that mine, and Anna's body is far too cute. Echidna, her face showing traces of awkwardness, turned away from Emilia, who seemed prepared to accept her claim. Emilia narrowed her amethyst eyes, seeing Echidna react like this. Taking a deep breath, she once again spoke. Emilia, I'm really worried about Meili. But I also get Echidna's point. So, starting from tomorrow again, let's do our best to try and get to the top of the tower. Of course, I will keep looking for Meili as much as I possibly can, but, Julius, remember to not neglect the importance of capturing the tower, Emilia Sama. Emilia, I know, sometimes you've got to think on your own about what's important. Putting her hand on her cheek, Emilia chastised herself, a firm resolve growing deep in her irises. Turning back, she looked towards Subaru, who had been observing the exchange much like a spectator would. For a moment, the intensity in her gaze overpowered him, but the words Emilia continued with did not scathe into him. Emilia, is that okay with you too, Subaru? Subaru, I guess that's okay. That way Meili can also rest in peace. No, I guess we all need to move forward. No, why are you asking me? Emilia, because Subaru read Meili's book. Subaru's reaction immediately after reading it. That's why I think the one who's the most worried about Meili should be Subaru. Emilia reminded him about it. Hearing her words, Subaru held his breath. Those directing their gazes at him was not limited to just Emilia. Beatrice, Ram, Echidna, and Julius, everyone was looking at Subaru. What sort of intention was present in those gazes? He could not hazard a guess. Without even realizing it, Subaru moved his lips in accordance to the treacherous spirit inside him. Subaru, I'm definitely worried, but I think Meili also would have wanted us to go on. Perhaps, just so he could utter the most superficial words in the world. Late at night, Subaru sprung himself into action, finally having the time to act freely without anyone interfering. Subaru, after the group had resolved to rack each other's brains for ideas on how to capture the second floor, and after having established a firm plan for tomorrow, the meeting at the dinner table ended. They then proceeded to get ready for bed. It was the night of a day in which unforeseen problems had occurred to one of their companions. Naturally, they had recommended that they put all their bedding together in one room and sleep together. So, more or less, they had all gathered in one room and created an improvised partition across the room, using a blanket to act as a curtain between the male and female sides. However, Subaru had been the sole person to insist on sleeping inside the spirit room. The after-effects from reading the Book of the Dead had been the bigger part of his excuse. In fact, having witnessed how abnormal Subaru had become after reading the Book of the Dead, no one had tried to argue with him. Of course, Beatrice had shown particularly strong disapproval at letting Subaru sleep alone, but the spirit room had a fixed capacity limit. Feeling sick with worry, Beatrice had to withdraw her opposition, yielding to Subaru's trembling voice. Rather than it being a boon of Subaru's acting prowess, it had likely been his awfully pale face that had influenced them. Honestly, it was a miracle that he had not collapsed. He was aware that he was in a terrible state. Meili. I think Meili also would have wanted us to go on. What an actor you are, Subaru. Meili, Fufu, don't get mad, Nuo. It isn't sarcasm. I truly think that, and I commend you for it. He had thought she had been surprisingly quiet during the meeting at the dinner table. He wondered if she had something to do with the barefaced lie he had told at the end. Even if he refused to listen to this troublesome hallucination, blocking his ears to her voice would be of no effect. That sweet voice would continue to cause him discomfort, just like the sound of scratching a chalkboard with nails. Meili, so, tonight you're not going to take care of the blue-haired one-sans head. Subaru. Her shade kept repeatedly hinting to Subaru, who had waited for the evening to grow dark to take action, about the existence of the sleeping beauty in the room. To the shade's temptation, identical to the one from several hours ago, Subaru's answer remained the same as before. Subaru, it's not her turn yet. Saying that, Subaru left the room without even looking at the sleeping beauty's face. At that moment, his eyes locked with Patrash's, who had slightly opened her eyes. He handled the situation by bringing his finger to his lips, shushing her, a gesture that indicated to her to keep it a secret. He did not know to what extent the intention had been transmitted to his reptilian companion, but at the same time, it felt like Patrash was cleverer than creatures like dogs or horses. Whether or not she was, it would be nice if she remained silent. Subaru. After ensuring he had made it so he ended up being left alone, the reason why Subaru started to move in the dead of night was not to take the lives of his sleeping companions and to put the Book of the Dead plan into practice. Of course, he had carefully considered that scheme too. With Subaru's abilities, it would be best for that plan to be realized with surprise attacks, and one could say that during their sleep would be the best opportunity. However, it was still too early. It was a last resort, a deed that went against humanity that he should not perform unless they forced his hand. Then, for what purpose had Subaru started acting in the dead of night? It was because of Meili. My corpse, what are you going to do about it? Realizing where Subaru was going, the voice of the little girl, as if standing behind him, posed him that question. Subaru did not direct her a response, but the direction he was walking towards was just as good as a confirmation to her question. Subaru was acting to dispose of Meili's still-hidden corpse. Subaru. Whether this could be dubbed as a ridiculous story or a lucky situation or whatever, in any case, he had no other choice. That today, Emilia and the others had not found Meili's remains should be called nothing more than a devil's plot, rather than God's plan. Thinking back on it, in regards to this abrupt situation, his cover-up was full of holes that were plain to see, to the point that he wanted to curse himself for his own dim-wittedness. Unexpected as it was, she had not been found. That had saved him. However, from tomorrow, while committing themselves to capturing the tower, it would be no strange thing if they were to find by chance something that had slipped by them. At least, he expected Emilia not to abandon searching for Meili. Seeing that she was a girl without any troubles of her own, her heart would not give in until the situation was resolved. It was easy to imagine that she would restart her search for the little girl that had vanished. Therefore, it was necessary for Subaru to have peace of mind. If he could not have peace of mind, he would not be able to lay the groundwork for his success. Unless he prepared the foundations, he would not be able to build his castle on top of it in the future. If the foundations could not be built, he would not be able to achieve his future. To Natsuki Subaru's peace, the existence of Meili Portrout was an obstacle. Meili, I guess it kind of feels like you're being even more restless now inside your head. He turned a deaf ear to her. She had just made her affirmation clear. She would get in his way. He firmly refused to allow that to come to pass. As Subaru traveled stealthily through the night, making sure not to draw any attention to himself, he arrived at the room where he had hidden Meili's corpse. Although the rooms in this area all looked the same, discoloration in the stone wall near the entrance of this one could be seen, making it so that the room was easy to identify via this landmark. Subaru. Honestly, this is going to leave a bad aftertaste. Taking her out from the tower's entrance into the desert and burying her in the sand would be for the best. She would continue to decay if left for a few more days inside the building. And although the temperature was not too high or too low, a body, after its biological functions had ceased, could not be expected to avoid decomposition. Indeed, if he wanted to never have to see it again, the best would be to bring it far away from the tower, as much of a pain as it would be, and turn her into chow for the witch beasts prowling about outside. However, he imagined how that would weigh on his heart. No matter what, it was an impossible decision. Subaru. At the back of the dim room was enshrined a square lump of rock. On the opposite side of it, her corpse was hidden. It was an awfully childish manner of hiding. It was not possible to overlook if looked at consciously. While feeling pathetic at losing his head, Subaru went around to the other side of the stone. There, Meili's approximately half-a-day-old remains. Subaru. Huh! Without thinking, his voice leaked out. His head renounced grasping the view before him. On the other side of that stone was absolutely nothing. At the very least, he had made arrangements for the little girl's corpse, closing her eyes, crossing her arms together on top of her chest. The bruises adorning her pale neck, even the corpse of the poor little girl, they were nowhere to be found. Subaru. Why, I was sure I left it here. It was supposed to be here. He could not have possibly mistaken the room. He had not made such a fundamental mistake when coming here. He had not. So, if he had not, where was the dead body which had to be here? Where had Meili Portrout's remains disappeared to? Stranger. What are you sneaking about to search for this late at night, Barusu? Subaru. Hick. Astounded, the voice coming from behind him made his body go stiff, and Subaru fearfully turned around. Paling, within Subaru's field of vision, at the entrance of the not-so-small room, stood a single silhouette. Bobbed pink hair, sharp, light pink irises, with crossed arms, her imposing yet lovely features staring in his direction with coldness. With that out-of-place feeling in her chest, while staring at the petrified Subaru, the girl Ram gazed at his eyes and with an absolutely cold tone of voice said, Ram. Or I guess I should call you a fake. A worthless excuse of a Barusu, of Natsuki Subaru.